All right, man, peace. So, brothers, this is going to be part 3. This will definitely be the last part because I don't see me being able to talk enough to get it past this part right here. But when we left off on part 2, we were evaluating some of this person here, Lisa D'Amour's comments pertaining to Mr. Nicholas Cruz and what her assessment was in regards to why he conducted himself in the way that he did. But she really hasn't said anything relevant or pertinent. You know why? Because her motivation is not to actually solve the problem or alleviate any of the pressures that would be on someone like him. Her agenda is to demonize gun owners, which is truly what modern behavioral sciences are about. It's a way to socially engineer people to disarm them, literally and figuratively. And we were just going over some of the symbols in regards to her attire. As you can see, once again, she's wearing the black and white, the duality, the bringing together of opposites. We saw that at the start of the previous video with Nora O'Donnell, as well as Gayle King wearing the black and white. This person here, Lisa D'Amour, she's wearing the necklace of hexagons, which is an allusion to Metatron's cube. For those of you who enjoy the Marvel films, you'll also know it. You'll also know the term that is used for that magical cube as the Tesseract. Okay, it's known as the Tesseract. If you ever watched Transformers, the cartoon, it was also known as the Matrix of Leadership. The cube has a lot of quote-unquote divine symbolism, going back to the Kemetic mystery school system, the Babylonian mystery school system, because it's looked at as the divine source of all knowledge. A lot of people who are not quite sure about the difference between the left-hand side of knowledge and the right-hand side of knowledge, they associate the two together. And both sides are meant to mimic each other so that only the people who are meant to understand the difference can see the difference. That's why there's so much confusion. That's why you have brothers who say, oh, well, the story of Christ, that's just a mimicry of the story of Horus or Osiris. And no, it's not. Cush took the teachings of Noah and he applied them to himself. After the flood, Noah taught all his sons, but the only son that held on faithfully to the teachings of Noah was Shem. He's also known in the scriptures as Melchizedek. Shem is the person who Abraham paid his tithes to. That's Melchizedek, aka Shem. He's the only one who stood faithfully to the doctrines that were taught to him by Noah. Okay? That's why it tells you in Genesis 9 that the Most High is the God of Shem. It doesn't tell you that he's the God of Ham or Japheth, because they departed from a lot of those teachings. That's why when you study the histories of many of these other nations and a lot of the historical civilizations, they have similar stories to what you see in the Bible, but they're allegorical because they were not given the actual historical rendition because their forefathers were not faithful to the Most High. So their versions of history are altered, they're skewed. So basically, to get back to the point, what Cush did was Cush took the teachings of Noah and he applied them to himself and his son. That is why he led the apostasy. All an apostasy is someone making themselves out to be God, as opposed to attributing the divine power to a higher power. That is how you yourself are blessed with a form of godhood, is when you give credit to the Most High. Then the Most High will come back and he'll bless you and he'll elevate you. But when you try to take credit away from him, the only thing that you're doing is you're initiating your own self-destruction. Okay? So Cush created the image of himself as the great diviner, the great prophet, the divine light, and he crafted the image of his son Nimrod according to the prophecies that were told to him that would comprise the actual Messiah, that being the Christ of the Bible. He wanted to apply all those attributes to his son Nimrod. But as opposed to understanding what the role of the Redeemer would be, which would be to offset the original sin and the casting down of man, he wanted Nimrod to be the Redeemer of mankind away from the worship of the Most High. So that is where all the confusion starts. But, that's a whole other topic for another day. The reason why I explain it is because there is a lot of confusion as to why what many of these people are doing is wrong and why they have to hide. This is why they have to hide it, because they know themselves that they're not really venerating Christ. They know that the story of Christ is disparate from the story of Osiris, but they want to perpetuate the confusion about whether or not Christ is just a fabrication. They want to perpetuate it because they want the people to lean towards their own ideology, that being the worship of Saturn, aka Baal, aka Molech. That's why they make these stories about how their statuettes found in Israel and it's Yahweh and a mother goddess. No, it's not. That's Baal and Astarte. And of course, you would find those statuettes in Israel because the scriptures themselves tell you that our people would backslide into the worship and the veneration of those false gods. So this is how they tell history. They purposefully mistell it. And it's building up to what we see today. Them trying desperately to get to the point where Cush was at, where they can build a proverbial tower in opposition to the Most High. And they're utilizing certain sleeper agents, certain Manchurian candidates to bring that about. Because when you utilize a Manchurian candidate, a sleeper agent, that means that it's very hard to trace exactly what's going on.
Thing that we need excellent educational facilities that can take care of kids who are also having emotional and behavioral problems.
Yes, in other words, we need more facilities where people can be engineered. At no point does she stress parenthood, because they don't care about parenthood in this society. They want to take your children and they want to use them as experiments. As I've already stated, Nicholas Cruz, as well as his brother, they were already sent to a behavioral psychologist, a social engineer, what they call a human engineer by the name of Dr. Lubin, who had a very high office in military intelligence as well as with NASA. That's another thing. All of your top NASA engineers, they're all MK programmed. They're heavily into something called, what's the term that they use? It's something akin to clairvoyance. Well, they had a program in NASA called Space Kids, where they would take children that they felt like had remote viewing. That's what it's called, remote viewing. If remote viewing is basically something akin to clairvoyance. They touched on remote viewing in the film Minority Report starring Tom Cruise. Remember those people, the psychics that they had in the pool who could tell when crimes were going to happen? That's real. The FBI, the CIA, they've been using that for a very long time. That's real. I don't know that if it's if the people that they utilize are as adept as it is depicted in the film, but that is real. Okay? And they will take children that they see have special mental abilities and they'll try to cultivate them in some of these behavioral psychological programs, which that's just code word for MK Ultra. They'll subject them to electroshock therapy. They'll subject them to the use of hallucinogenic drugs like LSD and PCP, angel dust, try to create this disassociation in their mind, and then program them so that they could be utilized as assets. That's why they show you in films like Born Identity and all this other films, man. That stuff is real.
Need to enhance. There are things like that. I also think we have to be realistic that there's no way to perfectly predict or prevent violence. And so mental health solutions will always be partial. We're always going to need other solutions too.
Does this case feel different to you this time? As a psychologist and a mother, I'm wondering, as you're watching this, people keep thinking maybe this time there will be changes. What are you looking at? What are you thinking?
Well, before she answers, the reason why Gail is asking her if this feels different is because Gail most likely has been triggered somewhere in her subconscious mind that they're going to utilize a different tactic, as I touched on in a different video. It's obvious that they want to use the high school kids to try to build up or drum up some type of sympathy that they know that they wouldn't get from adults, or if they're utilizing adults to protest gun ownership. Look, make no mistake about it. They want these kids, these pawns, to be utilized not to stop people from buying AR-15s or stopping young kids from buying AR-15s. They want to use them to demonize all gun owners. And it's perfect to use little high school girls because most of them are just a glutton for attention anyway. Right now, they're basking in the glow of the TV coverage. And it's really also a Trojan horse mechanism to exalt homosexuality, lesbianism, and feminism as well. Because you will very rarely see any heterosexual boys that will be aligned to that movement, at least not on the front line. They're trying to use this to push more of that female power nonsense.
Well, it's been quite remarkable to watch these teenagers in Parkland respond, and there is something that feels different. One is, I think, for many, there's been this sense of helplessness in the face of these events, especially as they continue to occur and policies and laws don't change. And so these teenagers have refused to be helpless. And, these teenagers bring a couple of things to the table that we haven't seen before. One is they are teenagers who are willing to exercise their willingness to question authority, which teenagers are very good at doing.
Ding. Exactly. And she's speaking, Miss Lisa DeMoore, speaking as someone who is in the know in regards to why they're using teenagers to push this current manifestation of the anti-gun ownership protest. She's speaking as if she's someone who was in on the think tank that was involved in comprising a lot of the components of this modernized version of the anti-gun protest.
The other thing is that they were there. They are talking as witnesses. They are talking as survivors. And that's a pretty powerful combination.
And they're also going to be mentally scarred as well. Austin Eubanks, who I spoke with, the Columbine survivor, very lucky.
Yeah.
Scarred for life, he said.
Of course, trauma is part of the programming. They have to scar you so that they can create the altars. They can split your consciousness. And by the way, since she mentions the mass shooting that occurred involving Mr. Dylan Klebold, he also was an admirer of the character of the Joker, as well as Arnold Krimp. The Columbine shooters were. And also notice that they wore all black when they engaged in that mass shooting. They were both under the MK programming. Colorado is a hotbed for the MK programming.
Since he still battles the trauma from surviving.
These are traumas.
Yeah.
And people who survive, are still heavily traumatized.
Lisa DeMoore, thank you so much. Great to have you on set.
Yes, Lisa DeMoore, thank you so much. Thank you for, a lot of that bullshit that you were spewing, but it is what it is. All right, so now I'm going to close up this series with this segment right here, and I want you guys to just pay very close attention to some of the imagery that they're going to allude to, which basically is going to bring everything full circle and just confirm what I've been stating from the very start in the opening of part 1 of this series on the shootings at the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida. That it was utilized as a proverbial human sacrifice or blood sacrifice to Heru/Tammuz, the phoenix bird, who was brought back reincarnated from the ashes. But just pay very close attention. Let's see what they have to say here.
Students from Stoneman Douglas High School are returning to class today. You can see students arriving for a half day of modified classes, 2 weeks after they fled from a gunman on campus.
17 students and staff members were killed on that Valentine's Day. The school district says there is now enhanced security at the school, but they are not giving any specifics.
The massacre led survivors and students from all over the U.S. to organize a call for tougher gun control laws. Adriana Diaz spoke to students and teachers.
A lot of these children don't really understand how society is run. They don't understand how society has to be run. They don't grasp the need for certain people to have guns, not just for protection, but for the understanding that the government was not meant to be trusted. And the Constitution was actually created off of the concept that the citizens are not supposed to trust their government. And, unfortunately, they don't grasp that. But they seem to grasp not trusting the government when it comes to verbal harassment and protesting, but not under the concept that the government can become despotic and the government can be altered in the blink of an eye, and the rights that you think you have can be taken away from you.
Ahead of Stoneman Douglas High School's reopening, she is outside the school in Parkland, Florida. Adriana, good morning.
Good morning. Both students and teachers are anxious about going back to school today. And one teacher told us that grief counselors will be in the classrooms of victims who passed away to provide support for survivors.
I think everyone's a little bit nervous to go.
It's going to be a huge rush walking in.
Returning to school was all 15-year-old sophomore Liam Kiernan could think about as he ate dinner with his family last night. But he says he's not afraid.
I see tomorrow as the beginning of change, and we will be the people to do it.
Absolutely. The return to your school is meant to be the initiation of change. And I mentioned this in a different video. When people talk about change, they're really referring to a form of the Hegelian dialectic. I'm not saying that's what he's referring to, but just intrinsically, subconsciously, he's aligning himself with a lot of the methodologies that are going to be used to bring about chaos in this society, or the attempts to, particularly pertaining to gun control and the new forms in which they're going to police the school system. Now, please understand that this also is going to be utilized as a mechanism to accustom the younger generation to being around a police force, security detail, to possibly being patted down, searched, creating more of a prison planet atmosphere even in their school system. And it's just so interesting to me. Guns have been a major issue in many of these so-called black schools for decades now. But a shooting occurs in a school that is, one would think, if not majority Caucasian, comprises a large demographic of Caucasians there, and it becomes an international deal. It is what it is.
Liam, along with more than 3,000 other Stoneman Douglas students, will attend a half day of 24-minute classes. Extra security and counselors will be on hand.
We just aren't quite sure yet what the new normal is.
AP psychology teacher Lisa Chauvin has taught at Stoneman Douglas for 26 years.
Now, do you see the exaltation of psychologists, which is really just a form of a conventional term for mental manipulators?
We're not really sure what to expect because everyone is coming with a different experience. Some students were directly involved in the events of that day. We're all human, we're all in this together, and we're going to go through the process of healing together.
Building 12, the crime scene, is blocked off by a fence covered with posters of support. No one will be allowed inside. The school board wants it torn down and a memorial built in its place.
I'm just hoping it's going to be a normal day.
Now, guys, pay very close attention to this interview right here, because this is what I'm referring to. The interview between the reporter and this young lady right here. This pretty much is going to put a bow on the sentiment that I've been making about so-called Valentine's Day and also the events that transpired at the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School on Valentine's Day. I'm not sure if she was prepped to make the statement that she made, but it provided a great amount of elucidation on what actually occurred here.
But I think there's going to be a somber mood.
Senior Anisha Sarapelli lost her close friend Carmen Shentrup in the Valentine's Day massacre.
She'd always brighten everyone's days, and now, she's not here. I'm still trying to fight the fact that this happened because I'm still in disbelief.
What's your school mascot?
The Eagles.
You can't say that without smiling.
I mean, it's such a good mascot for us, honestly. I mean, maybe a phoenix would have been better since out of the ashes we rise. And
hey, now, did you guys hear that? Did you guys hear that? Now, oftentimes, let me say this, oftentimes they will prep the interviewee to make statements like that. They'll say, look, we're going to say this, and then you're going to say that. Or we're going to make this statement. We're going to ask you this question. We're going to prompt you. And then you're going to instill strength in your school by saying that you guys are a phoenix, not an eagle. And the interviewee will just be so happy to be getting attention or just be the focus of some type of interview that they'll say, sure, why not? Whatever. Yeah, I'll say phoenix, sure. The reason why I wanted to culminate this 3-part series with this interview right here is because it's very obvious that the concept of the phoenix was something that they had to work in to this overall narrative of what occurred at the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School, because it was meant to be a commemoration of the life and death of Tammuz/Heru, which is who the Catholic Church is commemorating and venerating on what they call Ash Wednesday, which also happened to be Valentine's Day, So it brought together everything, the Lupercalia, as well as the commemoration of Tammuz/Heru, who was put to death and then rose again in the image of the phoenix bird. So I have very little doubt that this girl was prompted to say that. And I'm probably just going to rewind it for a moment just to look at something else that she was wearing.
And at this point, I've never been prouder to be an eagle.
Today is Anisha's 17th birthday. She told us she's thankful there's no lunch period, so she doesn't have to sit without her friend Carmen. The school returns to a full day of classes next week. Gail?
All right, so now I rewound it back. I just want to go over what Miss Anisha Sirapelli said one more time, just in context.
I'm just hoping it's going to be a normal day, but I think there's going to be a somber mood.
Senior Anisha...
Now look at what she has on her shirt. Now this may just be a t-shirt that she was given as part of the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas mental programming to prepare her for going back to the school. But on the front of her shirt, she has the wheel of the year, which is a Wiccan symbol for the 8 high holy days of the Wiccan calendar. And I mentioned this before because Kevin Hart likes to wear a leather jacket with the emblem of the wheel of the year on his left sleeve. Jay-Z also likes to wear that jacket. I'm not saying that this girl here is a Wiccan. I'm not saying that at all. I don't believe that she's really in the know. And I'm not quite sure exactly what that t-shirt is, but I'm pretty sure that it's in association to what she went through, the ritual that she was forced to endure as being a member of that high school, because she also has a ribbon pinned to that t-shirt. So I'm not saying that she's conscious of what she's being used for in this segment at all. All I'm saying is that it's very, very curious that they chose to utilize the Wheel of the Year symbol on her t-shirt. And then the phrase that she used later on in this interview would tell me that she was prompted to say what she said about the phoenix bird. Let's watch it one more time.
Sirapelli lost her close friend Carmen Schentrup in the Valentine's Day massacre.
She'd always brighten everyone's days, and now, she's not here. I'm still trying to fight the fact that this happened because I'm still in disbelief.
What's your school mascot?
The Eagles.
You can't say that without smiling.
I mean, it's such a good mascot for us, honestly. I mean, maybe a phoenix would have been better since out of the ashes we rise. And at this point, I've never been prouder to be an eagle.
Absolutely. So, brothers, once again, the modern day use of the eagle as a symbol of rulership or veneration, at least in regards to this kingdom, is meant to be in association with the phoenix bird that was utilized in ancient Kemet for Heru, who was also known as the falcon god. Now, we know that many times the falcon or the eagle are conflated because they look very similar. In America, they actually were going to make the national bird the turkey, but they changed it to the eagle. Why is that? Because once again, they wanted to connect themselves with ancient Kemet, because the founding fathers of America were very much intense adepts of the Babylonian Kemetic mystery school system. They venerated the Baphomet. That's why you see the symbols of Uncle Sam and also the Statue of Liberty, who's just the mother goddess, so on and so forth. All just meant to show you that America is the modern day reinvigoration of Rome, which was the tail end empire of Babylon, the spirit of Babylon. All empires basically have carried on the spirit of Babylon even up to today. Okay? So just to put a little bow on this series, yes, what occurred at the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School was a ritual. It was meant to help socially engineer society to reform the psychological outlook of a lot of the younger members of this society, to demonize gun owners. They know that nobody cares that a lot of so-called black youth are being killed in quote-unquote gun violence. That was not going to make anyone want to no longer own guns or view gun owners as good or positive people. But if they were able to initiate something that was traumatic on a mass scale as what occurred at Parkland, and then on top of that, put the battery in the backs of high schoolers, especially young high school girls and homosexuals and lesbians, and then on top of that, use actors who could deliver their lines extremely well, Now, I mean, that's pretty much as far as they can go on that angle. If this movement peters out, they're just going to have to try something totally different and even more severe.
Today is Anisha's 17th birthday. She told us she's thankful there's no lunch period, so she doesn't have to sit without her friend Carmen. The school returns to a full day of classes next week. Gail?
All right, Adriana, thank you. Earlier we spoke with Stoneman Douglas High School freshman Kelsey Friend. She says that her life was saved by her geography teacher, Scott Beagle, who died trying to shield his...
Now, you see here, Mr. Scott Beagle, he's just throwing up the peace sign as far as he knows. But there's a reason why they used this photo, because as I've told you guys before, the peace sign is really for Pan. Okay, the peace sign was introduced into the modern understanding by Mr. Winston Churchill, who himself was a Druid. You can look this up. Please don't take my word for it. Look it up. He was a Druid and a Wiccan, and he brought the use of the peace sign, or the so-called victory sign, into the social consciousness.
Shield his students from the gunman. Kelsey, we are all thinking of you today because unfortunately you and your classmates have to get used to a new normal. Are you ready to go back to school today? How are you feeling?
I am ready to go back to school, but I'm feeling a little scared and a little nervous. Like right now my heart's pounding.
I can imagine, because you were put through a traumatic event. Brothers, I'm going to wrap it up here. Okay, I've already made my point in regards to this issue, and we'll see how things transpire from here. I know that there's a brother who comes on my channel who states that he's an attendee of the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School. He was asking me to do a series on it. So, brother, here you go. All right. So hopefully everything is well with you and you're able to keep all your mental faculties together. All right. But anyway, peace.